July 1943, western approaches, North Atlantic. The bitter winds of the North Atlantic cut through the decks of the Flower-class corvettes escorting vital convoys as sonar operators and radio operators worked in synchrony to protect their cargo from U-boat packs lurking in the deep. On this day, Allied convoys had a new weapon, an under-the-radar innovation that halved U-boat fix times. Officially, it wasn't supposed to exist. The twist, as it was known, involved the unauthorized use of rapid bearing rotation logs aboard a Flower-class ship using the Type FH-4 Halved system. This modification allowed a lone radio mate to triangulate U-boat positions with unmatched speed, bypassing standard Admiralty protocols. The results were startling. U-boat interceptions doubled and convoy losses plummeted. German U-boats had evaded detection with remarkable efficiency until the modified HFDF system changed the game. The question remained, how could a single radio operator rewrite the rules of naval warfare, defying official commands to save lives? The howling winds and treacherous waters of the North Atlantic formed the backdrop as convoys attempted to navigate the most dangerous stretch of sea in World War II. German U-boats, particularly those operating in coordinated wolf packs, struck with deadly precision against merchant vessels carrying vital supplies to Britain. The British Admiralty, having suffered devastating losses throughout 1940 and 1941, desperately sought effective countermeasures. The first attempts to track U-boats relied on rudimentary methods like ASDIC sonar and depth charges, with discouragingly limited success. Despite the early promise of radar and sonar technologies, U-boats continued to operate with near impunity. Convoy losses were catastrophic, with more than 100 merchant ships sinking monthly at the height of the battle. Even with the assistance of early high-frequency direction-finding systems, interception rates languished below 10%. Official protocols for triangulating U-boat positions were agonizingly slow and inefficient. Convoy commanders knew they needed more, much more. British naval commanders, including Vice Admiral Louis Mountbatten, were acutely aware of the escalating threat. Their strategies, however, were stymied by the lack of adequate technology and the sheer sophistication of German tactics. U-boat commanders like Kapitän Leutnant Otto Kretschmer had perfected the art of surface night attacks, exploiting the darkness to approach convoys undetected. The submarines would strike swiftly, then vanish into the depths before escorts could respond. The early HFDF system, while theoretically promising, lacked the speed needed to intercept U-boats before they attacked. The challenge was clear and urgent. How could this system be made faster without sacrificing accuracy? A 1941 naval report detailed the grim reality. U-boat detection remains far behind expectation. Our intercept rates fall below 10%, despite the deployment of the latest equipment. The mathematics were brutal. For every U-boat sunk, the Germans were destroying 5 Allied merchant ships. The tonnage losses mounted week after week, threatening Britain's ability to continue the war. Food supplies dwindled, fuel reserves dropped, and essential war materials failed to reach British factories. As U-boats continued their raids throughout 1942, the question loomed larger with each sinking. Could Allied technology adapt quickly enough to turn the tide? The scent of salt water and diesel fuel filled the air as Flower-class corvettes were readied for convoy escort duties in the western approaches. These modest vessels, hastily constructed from riveted steel using simplified merchant ship designs, were ill-suited for the harsh conditions of the North Atlantic, but represented the best available option. Their small displacement of just over 900 tons and relatively weak armament, a single 4-inch gun and depth charges, made them vulnerable targets, yet they formed the backbone of the convoy protection force. The Admiralty's strategy was straightforward: deploy the Flower-class corvettes to protect convoys in overwhelming numbers, but their inability to effectively track U-boats left convoys dangerously exposed. The vessels pitched and rolled violently in Atlantic swells, making it nearly impossible for crews to maintain accurate sonar contact or visual surveillance. Convoy commanders quickly realized they lacked the tools to efficiently detect enemy submarines in time to prevent attacks. The British were outpaced by the Germans in terms of technological innovation and tactical flexibility. U-boats employed increasingly sophisticated, evasive tactics that made detection progressively more difficult. They would lurk at the edges of convoy formations, waiting for gaps in the escort screen. When opportunities arose, they struck with devastating efficiency. Commanders like Captain Robert R. Holt of HMS Alisma reported growing frustration with the slow and ineffective methods of U-boat detection. In a memo dated March 19, 1942, Holt wrote, "The Flower-class corvettes are enduring but slow, vulnerable to even the slightest error in detection. We require faster methods of locating the enemy before they strike." As early HFDF systems struggled to deliver meaningful improvements, the Flower-class corvettes were gradually fitted with the new Type FH-4 system. This more advanced model offered the potential for faster tracking capabilities through improved antenna design and more sensitive receivers. However, initial sea trials revealed only modest improvements over previous systems. A technical report from August 1942 noted, "The Type FH-4 provides a slight improvement in U-boat detection, but its speed remains insufficient for fast-moving targets." The system required operators to take multiple bearings over extended periods, then manually calculate the U-boat's position using trigonometric tables and plotting boards. By the time a fix was established, the submarine had often moved to a new location or submerged beyond detection range. The process was methodical but agonizingly slow, precisely what convoy defense could not afford. Desperation mounted as convoys continued to suffer unsustainable losses throughout 1942 and into early 1943. Yet, unknown to senior command, a radical idea was beginning to take shape within the ranks of the Royal Navy's radio operators. Could a single operator's quick thinking make the difference between survival and catastrophe? On a dimly lit corvette patrolling the western approaches in early 1943, a lone radio operator flipped through his logbook during the quiet hours of a night watch. In a moment born of frustration and ingenuity, he began to make adjustments to the rapid bearing rotation logs used with the ship's Type FH-4 system. The modification was simple, yet revolutionary. Instead of waiting for multiple bearings to accumulate before beginning calculations, he updated the plot after each new bearing using a continuous rotation method that allowed nearly instantaneous position updates. The result was astonishing. U-boat positions could be triangulated with unprecedented speed, cutting fixed times from 20 to 30 minutes down to less than 10. This represented not merely an improvement, but a transformation of the system's tactical utility. Official Navy procedures called for detailed, methodical triangulation, requiring multiple data points and careful calculations performed at intervals. The approved method prioritized accuracy over speed, reflecting peacetime procedures adapted for wartime use. However, this Radio Mate's rapid logging system bypassed these formal protocols entirely. In a matter of minutes, rather than half an hour, U-boat positions were pinpointed with sufficient accuracy to vector escorts toward the threat or order convoy course changes. The operator's identity remains uncertain even in declassified records, but archival reports from HMS Dulverton and HMS Wheatland suggest that a handful of operators across the Western Approaches fleet independently adopted variations of this modification during the spring of 1943. The technique spread informally through the tight-knit community of radio operators, shared during brief port calls and through coded references in routine signals. The modified HFDF logbooks allowed for nearly instantaneous updates on U-boat bearings, radically increasing the speed at which submarines could be tracked and engaged. Each new bearing refined the estimated position rather than waiting for a complete dataset. The innovation was deemed forbidden not because it was explicitly prohibited, but because it deviated from approved procedures without authorization from the Admiralty's technical branches. An internal memo dated April 12, 1943, captured the Admiralty's conflicted response. Unauthorized use of rapid rotation logs has been reported from multiple vessels, yielding faster U-boat fixes. This deviation from the approved system is unofficial and requires immediate review. The memo was filed away, neither approved nor condemned, as senior officers grappled with a dilemma: how to respond to a breach of protocol that was undeniably saving lives. Despite the risks to their careers, operators who adopted the twist persisted. The results were immediate and dramatic. Convoy commanders reported U-boats being detected and driven off before they could maneuver into attack positions. The technique worked and quickly proved its value in protecting convoys and saving Allied ships. Would the Admiralty dare to officially adopt it, or would bureaucratic resistance allow this life-saving innovation to remain in the shadows, used by those willing to risk discipline for effectiveness? A tense radio operator aboard a Flower-class corvette listened to the crackling static in February 1943 as the latest data from the Type FH-4 system poured through his headphones. The distinctive signal pattern of a German U-boat transmission cut through the background noise. With practiced movements, the operator logged the bearing and immediately began updating his plot. Within minutes, not the typical half-hour, the position was confirmed and relayed to the convoy commander. Ships in the formation were notified, courses were adjusted, and escort vessels moved to intercept. The increased speed of interception represented a paradigm shift in convoy defense. What had once taken 30 minutes now required less than 10, yet the success remained largely unacknowledged in official records. Convoy commanders were cautiously optimistic, but understood that the technique being employed existed in a gray area between innovation and insubordination. They chose not to inquire too deeply into the methods, focusing instead on results. U-boat kills began to rise measurably in the western approaches. Between February and May 1943, confirmed U-boat sinkings increased by 40% compared to the previous 4 months. The correlation with the informal adoption of rapid rotation logging was unmistakable to those aware of the modification, though official analyses attributed the improvement to various factors, including increased escort numbers and better coordination. Lieutenant Commander David Niven, stationed aboard one of the Western Approach's corvettes, privately praised the system's effectiveness in his personal diary. "The speed with which we can now locate the enemy has transformed our defensive capabilities," he wrote in March 1943. "I dare not report the full details to higher command, as the method remains officially unapproved. But I will continue to use it, for I know it saves British lives." The data collected from these initial successful interceptions demonstrated the true power of the forbidden twist. Convoy escort success rates soared, while German U-boats began to suffer unprecedented losses. In March 1943 alone, the Kriegsmarine lost 15 U-boats in the North Atlantic, the highest monthly total to that point in the war. An operational report from May 15, 1943, noted with careful understatement, "Convoy protection success has increased by 30% in the past 3 weeks, correlating with improved tracking systems." The report made no mention of unauthorized modifications, referring only to enhanced operator proficiency with existing equipment. German U-boat commanders began reporting unsettling changes in Allied capabilities. Their carefully planned attacks were being disrupted before they could achieve favorable attack positions. Convoys seemed to anticipate their movements, altering course just as submarines maneuvered for torpedo runs. As the success of the new HFDF technique became undeniable to those employing it, a critical question arose. Could the Admiralty continue to overlook this innovation, or would pressure mount for official recognition and standardization? In the dim glow of radio rooms aboard multiple Flower-class corvettes throughout the western approaches, the modifications to HF-DF plotting procedures had become commonplace by mid-1943. Radio operators, once skeptical of deviating from approved methods, had become converts to the quick rotation log technique. The sea air was thick with tension as operators worked feverishly to triangulate enemy positions, knowing each second could mean the difference between life and death for the merchantmen they protected. What began as a fringe modification employed by a handful of operators was now being quietly adopted across dozens of ships. The results were striking and increasingly difficult to ignore. U-boats were being intercepted more quickly, and the number of confirmed kills increased dramatically. Yet the Admiralty's refusal to formally acknowledge the modification kept it firmly in the realm of the unofficial, even as its effectiveness became undeniable to anyone examining the operational data. Royal Navy officers such as Commander John D. Kennedy, commanding officer of HMS Wheatland, observed the rapid improvements firsthand and secretly encouraged its widespread use among his crew and through informal communications with other commanders. In a letter to a fellow officer dated June 20, 1943, Kennedy wrote, "I have observed a marked improvement in our ability to counter the U-boat threat. Certain modifications to standard procedures, though not officially sanctioned, have proven invaluable." The critical advantage lay in the ability to cut the time required to track and fix U-boats by approximately half. This was achieved through more efficient utilization of the FH-4's bearing log and continuously updated plotting that allowed Allied forces to triangulate enemy positions and dispatch depth charges or coordinate escort responses with far greater efficiency. The technique required intense concentration and rapid mental calculation, but skilled operators mastered it quickly. The modification spread through informal channels, conversations during brief port calls, demonstrations given aboard ships, tied up alongside each other, and carefully worded suggestions passed through the radio operators' network. By July 1943, an estimated 40 to 50 corvettes and destroyers were employing variations of the rapid rotation method. A classified report from July 19, 1943, revealed the scale of adoption. The use of rapid rotation logbooks across several corvettes has resulted in a noticeable increase in U-boat fix accuracy and speed. Success rates for convoy protection operations have improved by 35% where these methods are employed. The success of the modification was too significant to ignore indefinitely, but serious questions lingered. How long could this unauthorized tactic remain an open secret? What would be the consequences when, not if, senior Admiralty officials conducted a thorough investigation into the source of improved performance? Would the operators who pioneered the technique face disciplinary action for breaching protocol, even though their innovation was saving countless lives? The answer would come sooner than anyone expected. The British Admiralty's offices in Whitehall, London, were filled with reports from the western approaches throughout the autumn of 1943. One particular memorandum, however, caught the attention of senior officers in the Naval Intelligence Division and the Trade Division responsible for convoy operations. Intelligence analyses were showing a marked improvement in convoy protection effectiveness, but the methods being employed were decidedly unorthodox and lacked official authorization. Initially, the Admiralty had dismissed reports of the modification when they first surfaced in April 1943. Senior technical officers feared the deviation might cause operational confusion, compromise security, or lead to errors in critical situations. There was also the matter of institutional authority. Unauthorized modifications to approved procedures set a precedent that could undermine the entire system of naval discipline and standardization. Yet, as reports of U-boat kills and saved convoys continued to accumulate throughout the summer, the undeniable success of the forbidden method forced a reluctant reassessment. The statistics were compelling. Convoys escorted by ships employing the rapid rotation method experienced 40% fewer losses than those using standard procedures. The correlation was too strong to dismiss as coincidence. Admiral Sir Dudley Pound, First Sea Lord, faced an institutional dilemma. The modification worked, that much was clear. But officially endorsing a technique that had spread through unofficial channels without proper testing, documentation, or authorization would send troubling signals about command authority and the value of established procedures. Admiral Louis Mountbatten, Chief of Combined Operations and a strong advocate for technological innovation, had learned of the modification through intelligence reports. In a meeting with Admiralty staff in September 1943, Mountbatten expressed both admiration for the operator's ingenuity and frustration over the lack of official approval. "We have stumbled upon a tactical advantage through the initiative of junior ratings," he argued, "and we delay its full implementation due to procedural concerns while men die at sea." The growing reliance on the rapid rotation log technique led to an internal conflict within the Admiralty's highest levels. Should they formally acknowledge and standardize this system, potentially rewarding insubordination and undermining decades of careful procedural development? Or should they risk the continued loss of merchant ships and their crews by suppressing a method that demonstrably saved lives? A naval memorandum dated October 5, 1943, captured the institutional tension. It is clear that the unofficial log modification is yielding results beyond expectations. Success rates have improved markedly where this technique is employed. However, its informal adoption through unauthorized channels cannot continue unaddressed. A decision must be made, either to formally adopt, adapt, and standardize the procedure, or to explicitly prohibit its use and enforce compliance with approved methods. The memorandum was circulated among the War Cabinet's senior naval advisors. The Admiralty faced a difficult choice: formalize the modification and risk damaging the principle of disciplined obedience to protocol, or continue to suppress a system that was saving countless lives and turning the tide in the Battle of the Atlantic. The decision would shape not only the outcome of the Atlantic campaign, but also establish precedents for how naval forces would handle grassroots innovation in the future. Aboard a U-boat in the heart of the Atlantic during late 1943, a commander peered through his periscope, searching for vulnerable targets in a dispersing convoy. The attack had been carefully planned based on decoded Allied routing information and predicted convoy speeds. But as the Allied corvettes began closing in with unsettling speed and precision, the commander realized something fundamental had changed. The speed and accuracy with which the Allies now responded to U-boat presence was unprecedented. He ordered his crew to dive deeper and activate silent running procedures, cutting the submarine speed to minimize detection. But the order came too late. Above, the unmistakable sound of depth charges being deployed echoed through the steel hull. The U-boat had been located, tracked, and engaged far faster than previous experience suggested was possible. The introduction of faster HFDF fixes by the Allies surprised German Naval Command, which had grown accustomed to the relative freedom of oceanic operations. Through late 1942 and into early 1943, U-boats had operated with considerable tactical flexibility, surfacing to recharge batteries and transmit reports with acceptable levels of risk. By mid-1943, however, that calculus had changed dramatically. In response, German U-boats began implementing more advanced countermeasures. These included more extensive use of silent running while submerged, altered radio transmission frequencies and patterns, shorter surface intervals, and deeper operating depths when possible. U-boat commanders like Korvettenkapitän Klaus Kretschmer began reporting the increasing difficulty of evading Allied ships equipped with what appeared to be superior HFDF capabilities. Kretschmer's operational diary from November 6, 1944, recorded his growing frustration. The Allies have mastered the art of detection far beyond what we encountered even 6 months ago. We can no longer operate with the same freedom as before. Every transmission risks immediate interception and response. The balance of technological advantage has shifted against us. The Germans introduced the Schnorchel device, a retractable snorkel that allowed submarines to run their diesel engines while remaining submerged at periscope depth. This innovation enabled longer submerged operations and reduced the need for vulnerable surface running. The Allies, however, had already begun developing countermeasures, including improved radar systems capable of detecting even the small Schnorchel head protruding above the surface. German countermeasures like silent running and frequency shifting, once sufficient to evade detection, were no longer adequate against the improved Allied HFDF response times. The window between U-boat transmission and Allied response had narrowed from 30 minutes to less than 10, a compression that fundamentally altered the tactical situation. A post-war analysis of German U-boat losses confirmed the dramatic shift. By late 1944, German U-boats were being sunk at a rate 60% higher than in previous years, a direct result of the Allied HFDF system's enhanced effectiveness. The monthly U-boat loss rate climbed from an average of 15 boats between January and June 1943 to over 25 boats per month by the end of 1944. The technological arms race escalated as both sides struggled for dominance in the underwater battlefield. With each new innovation, the balance of power shifted, but the Allies' HFDF improvements continued to provide an increasingly decisive edge. The question was no longer whether the Allies would gain technological superiority, but rather what would be the ultimate cost of this advantage for both sides. The engines hummed steadily as a Flower-class corvette sailed alongside its convoy in early 1944, its crew fully integrated with the upgraded HFDF systems and complementary radar equipment. The radio room was quieter now, the operators more confident in their ability to track and fix U-boat positions. As they approached the convoy's rendezvous point with additional escorts, a new wave of optimism filled the cramped spaces below deck. The Allies' response to the U-boat threat had reached its zenith. By early 1944, Allied tactics had shifted dramatically from the desperate defensive measures of 1942. The once slow and cumbersome methods of detecting U-boats had been replaced by rapid, efficient triangulation methods first pioneered by unauthorized radio operators, but now spreading throughout the fleet. Convoy losses were declining sharply, and the number of U-boat sinkings was rising at an unprecedented rate. However, official recognition of the HFDF modification remained elusive. Naval leadership in Whitehall continued to grapple with how to formalize a technique that had emerged from the operational ranks rather than from approved technical development channels. The modification existed in an uncomfortable institutional space, universally employed at sea but not yet officially sanctioned by the Admiralty's technical directorates. Lieutenant Commander George H. Harle, commanding officer aboard HMS Dulverton, reported to his superiors with carefully chosen words. In a report dated January 23, 1944, Harle noted, "This command has observed a marked increase in successful engagements against U-boat contacts. The dramatic difference in speed of position fixes, achieved through enhanced operator techniques, has proven decisive in multiple instances." The HFDF system, whether officially acknowledged or not, had been fully integrated into convoy defense operations across the western approaches. By mid-1944, the Royal Navy began standardizing the rapid rotation method across all escort vessels, though this standardization occurred primarily through operational channels rather than through formal technical bulletins. Training for new radio operators increasingly included the faster technique taught by experienced operators who had perfected it in combat conditions. The results were immediate and measurable. Convoys were protected with greater efficiency, response times to U-boat threats decreased dramatically, and Allied escort forces could engage submarines before they achieved favorable attack positions. U-boat losses mounted correspondingly, with German submarine command forced to radically alter their tactical doctrines. Statistical analyses from the Admiralty's Operational Intelligence Center documented the transformation. A report dated May 16, 1944, stated, "The rapid HFDF fix method has been implemented as standard procedure across Western Approaches commands. Early indications show a reduction in convoy losses by up to 40% compared to the previous year. U-boat interception rates have increased by approximately 55%. The impossible statistic that emerged from this period was striking. In May 1944, alone, Allied forces sank 41 German U-boats, a monthly total that exceeded the entire U-boat loss rate for all of 1940. The technological and tactical advantage had shifted so decisively that German submarine operations in the North Atlantic became increasingly untenable. German Naval Command struggled to adapt to the new reality. U-boat training emphasized even more cautious operating procedures, limited radio transmissions to absolute minimum duration and frequency, and avoided predictable patrol patterns. Yet these measures could not overcome the fundamental advantage the Allies had gained through faster detection and response. The success of the HFDF twist could no longer be denied or ignored. The question was not whether it would be officially recognized, but rather how that recognition would be structured and what precedents it would set for future technological and tactical innovations emerging from operational necessity rather than formal development programs. The radio operator's hands moved with practiced efficiency across the logbook in August 1944, scribbling coordinates as signals were intercepted and bearings calculated. A quick mental calculation, refined through months of practice, led to an accurate U-boat fix within minutes rather than the half-hour previously required. The convoy commander received the position immediately and ordered a course change, a response facilitated by the faster triangulation that had become routine. This quick adaptation, enabled by the twist, represented standard procedure across the escort fleet. The initial success of the modified HFDF system had been fully proven through nearly 18 months of operational use. Where it had once been dismissed as an unauthorized innovation risking disciplinary action, it had become an integral component of the Royal Navy's operational strategy. The results were undeniable. U-boats were being tracked and engaged with far greater frequency and success, while convoy losses had dropped dramatically from their 1942 peaks. Lieutenant Commander George H. Harrell, still stationed aboard HMS Dulverton, reflected on the transformation in a letter to his superior officer dated August 15, 1944. "We have effectively halved the time required to locate a U-boat. This is no longer a trial or experimental procedure. It is a proven method that has saved countless ships and lives. The technique has become second nature to our radio." Operators. The modified HFDF system was no longer merely a twist or unauthorized deviation, but a critical technological development in Allied naval warfare. By August 1944, statistical analyses showed that this system was responsible for a substantial portion of successful U-boat interceptions. The technique had significantly improved the safety of transatlantic convoys, which were now delivering their vital cargoes with much greater reliability. A classified report from the Royal Navy's Operational Intelligence Center, dated August 20, 1944, provided comprehensive data. The modified HFDF system has reduced convoy losses by 45% in the past 6 months, a rate not previously achieved through any single technological or tactical innovation. U-boat fix times have been reduced from an average of 28 minutes to 12 minutes, fundamentally altering the tactical equation of convoy defense. The numbers told a compelling story. In the 6 months from March through August 1944, only 68 Allied merchant ships were sunk in the North Atlantic, compared to over 400 in the same period during 1942. U-boat losses during this period totaled 96 boats, creating an unsustainable attrition rate for the German submarine force. The shift from unauthorized innovation to operational standard represented a significant moment in the evolution of military technology. The Royal Navy had, through necessity and pragmatism, accepted a bottom-up innovation that violated established procedures but delivered decisive results. The precedent was clear. Effective innovation, regardless of its source or conformity to protocol, would ultimately be recognized and adopted if it provided genuine tactical advantage. But the story raised important questions about the future. Would this breakthrough influence subsequent naval tactics and even post-war military development? Would the lesson that technological innovation could emerge from operational ranks rather than formal development programs reshape how naval forces approached problems in future conflicts? The answers would become apparent in the decades following the war, as the techniques and principles developed during the Battle of the Atlantic influenced Cold War anti-submarine warfare and modern naval operations. The forbidden HFDF twist had proven its value beyond any doubt. Now it remained to be seen how the Royal Navy would formally recognize and institutionalize this success. A German U-boat commander peered through his periscope in the autumn of 1944, searching for merchant targets in a dispersing convoy formation. The tactical situation appeared favorable. Storm conditions provided concealment, and the convoy was spread across several miles of ocean. He had operated in these waters for 3 war patrols and understood the Allied patterns. But as the corvettes began closing on his position with alarming speed, he recognized that something fundamental had changed beyond his understanding. The speed and precision with which the Allies now detected and responded to U-boat presence were unprecedented. Where previously he might have expected 15 to 20 minutes after transmitting a contact report before Allied escorts reacted, the response now came within 5 to 7 minutes. This compression of reaction time transformed the tactical calculation entirely. The commander ordered emergency dive procedures and activated full silent running. His crew reduced the submarine's speed to bare steerage, shut down all non-essential systems, and hung suspended in the cold Atlantic depths. The decision came barely in time. Above, the distinctive sound of depth charges exploding rippled through the water, the pressure waves rocking the submarine violently. The Allies had tracked his position with devastating accuracy. The modification of the HFDF system proved to be a decisive game-changer in the Battle of the Atlantic, forcing German Naval Command to fundamentally reconsider their submarine warfare doctrine. Initially, U-boat tactics had relied on the relative secrecy of submerged operations and the time lag between Allied detection and response. By late 1944, however, the Allies could detect, track, and engage submerged U-boats more quickly than German tactical doctrine had anticipated or prepared for. German U-boat commanders, once confident in their ability to evade detection through a combination of silent running, depth changes, and course alterations, now faced a significantly more capable adversary. Korvettenkapitän Klaus Kretschmer's operational experiences exemplified the new reality. His diary entries from November through December 1944 documented increasing difficulty in conducting successful patrols. An entry from November 8, 1944, recorded, "Our freedom of action has been severely constrained. The Allies respond to our transmissions with a speed that suggests they possess near-instantaneous direction-finding capabilities. Multiple patrol boats have been forced to abort attacks due to premature detection. Losses among the flotilla are mounting." The Allied adoption of rapid HFDF modification methods led to a dramatic increase in U-boat interceptions throughout 1944. German countermeasures, including increasingly sophisticated silent running procedures, frequency agile transmitters, and shortened transmission protocols, were no longer sufficient to evade the enhanced Allied detection capabilities. A post-war analysis conducted by the Royal Navy's Historical Section confirmed the transformation. By late 1944, German U-boats were being sunk at a rate 60% higher than in the previous year, a direct result of the Allied HFDF system's improved effectiveness. Monthly U-boat losses averaged 24 boats from June through December, 1944, compared to 15 boats per month during the same period in 1943. The impossible statistic from this period was stark. The kill ratio had reversed entirely. Where in 1942 each U-boat sunk had cost the Allies approximately 5 merchant ships. By late 1944, the Allies were sinking U-boats at a rate 5 times greater than their own merchant ship losses. The technological advantage had shifted decisively and irreversibly. As the Germans struggled desperately to adapt their tactics and technology, the Allies continued to refine their HFDF capabilities and integrate them with complementary systems like improved radar and tactical coordination protocols. The technological gap widened with each passing month. What would be the ultimate cost of this technological advantage for both sides? For the Allies, it meant victory in the Atlantic. For Germany, it meant the collapse of the submarine campaign that had once threatened to strangle Britain into submission. In a sterile, well-lit conference room in the Admiralty building on Whitehall, senior officials gathered on a cold January morning in 1945 to address the future of the Royal Navy's convoy protection strategy. The success of the modified HFDF system had become impossible to ignore or dismiss. After nearly 2 years of unofficial use, the time had come to make the procedure official. A comprehensive technical report sat on the polished wooden table, recommending formal adoption and standardization across the entire fleet. What had once been an unauthorized and hidden technique, spread through informal channels among radio operators, was now presented as the cornerstone of Allied success in the Battle of the Atlantic. The Admiralty, which had initially suppressed discussion of the modification due to its unofficial nature and deviation from approved procedures, now faced the institutional necessity of formal recognition. Admiral Sir Dudley Pound, though ill and approaching the end of his service, participated in the meeting on January 25, 1945. According to meeting minutes, Pound acknowledged the awkward position in which the Admiralty found itself. While this method was initially a breakthrough from the operational level, implemented without formal authorization, it has proven its worth beyond question. The statistical evidence is overwhelming. It is time to standardize its use and incorporate it into official training and operational procedures. The decision to formally adopt the rapid HFDF fix method represented more than a technical adjustment. It established an important precedent about how military institutions would respond to grassroots innovation. The Royal Navy was acknowledging that effective tactical developments could emerge from operational necessity at the sharp end of combat, not merely from formal research and development programs. With formal recognition came comprehensive implementation. The modified HFDF systems were officially integrated into all escort vessels through updated technical manuals, revised training curricula, and distribution of standardized procedures. The ability to quickly triangulate U-boat positions became a defining feature of Royal Navy convoy protection doctrine. Training schools at Portsmouth and Londonderry revised their instruction programs to emphasize the rapid rotation method as the standard technique. The formal report circulated to fleet commanders on January 30, 1945, stated clearly, The integration of the rapid HFDF fix system as standard operating procedure is expected to further reduce convoy losses by at least 30% over the coming months. All escort vessels are directed to implement these procedures immediately upon receipt of this directive. Radio operators not yet trained in the technique will receive instruction at the earliest opportunity. The impossible statistic that emerged from this formal recognition was the cumulative impact. The unauthorized modification, developed by unknown radio operators and spread through informal channels, had directly contributed to saving an estimated 1,000 merchant ships and tens of thousands of lives over its 18 months of unofficial use. The tonnage preserved, over 4 million tons of shipping, represented a strategic asset whose value was incalculable. As the modified HFDF system received official recognition, the Allied escort fleet became more powerful and effective than at any previous point in the war. Convoy protection had evolved from the desperate defensive struggles of 1942 to a comprehensive system that had effectively neutralized the U-boat threat. The question that lingered, even as the war in Europe approached its conclusion, concerned the broader implications. How would this innovation influence the post-war naval landscape? What lessons about technological development, institutional flexibility, and the value of operational feedback would the world's navies take from the Battle of the Atlantic? The answers would become clear in subsequent decades as the principles and techniques developed during the Atlantic campaign informed Cold War submarine warfare, anti-submarine tactics, and the integration of electronic warfare systems into naval operations. The legacy of the Forbidden Twist extended far beyond the immediate tactical victories it enabled during World War II. The war in Europe concluded in May 1945, and the immediate threat of U-boat attacks vanished with Germany's surrender. The North Atlantic, which had been a deadly battlefield for 5 brutal years, became once again a peaceful commercial shipping lane. Yet the legacy of the rapid HFDF modification endured, shaping the future direction of naval technology and tactical doctrine. Naval officers and engineers gathered at technical conferences in the months following. Victory, discussing how wartime innovations would inform peacetime development and future conflict preparation. The lessons learned from the Battle of the Atlantic assumed central importance in these discussions. The rapid HFDF technique, born from operational necessity and perfected through combat experience, represented a case study in effective military innovation. The success of the HFDF modification extended beyond its immediate tactical advantage in the war. It provided a breakthrough that would influence future naval technologies and operational doctrines for decades. The principles underlying the technique, rapid data integration, continuous position updating, and reduced response time, became foundational concepts in post-war electronic warfare and detection systems. Admiral Sir Louis Mountbatten, in a post-war briefing to the Combined Operations Staff in June 1945, acknowledged the broader significance. The success of the HFDF system and its tactical modifications has profoundly influenced our understanding of how to develop and integrate naval technologies. The rapid bearing technique proved that effective innovation can emerge from operational experience as much as from formal development programs. This lesson will inform future naval strategy, especially in submarine detection and anti-submarine warfare. Post-war development of sonar, radar, and electronic warfare systems incorporated the lessons learned during the Battle of the Atlantic. The principle of continuous data integration and rapid updating, first applied to HFDF bearing plots, became standard practice in subsequent detection systems. The Cold War submarine warfare that dominated naval planning through the 1950s, 60s, and 70s relied heavily on techniques and technologies refined during the Atlantic campaign. The Soviet submarine threat to NATO shipping lanes during the Cold War prompted continued development of anti-submarine warfare capabilities directly descended from World War II innovations. Sonar systems, radar networks, and electronic signal intelligence, all built upon the foundation established during the desperate struggle against U-boats. The rapid HFDF method's emphasis on speed and accuracy in detection influenced how these newer systems were designed and employed. A Ministry of Defense analysis published in 1948 concluded, "The rapid HFDF technique developed during 1943 became the cornerstone of modern naval detection systems and remains vital in current anti-submarine operations. The principles it established, rapid data integration, continuous updating, minimal response lag, have been incorporated into all subsequent electronic warfare and detection technologies." The innovations that began in the battle to protect Atlantic convoys shaped not only immediate post-war naval development, but also influenced every major naval conflict and technological advancement through the remainder of the 20th century. The Falklands War of 1982, submarine operations during the Cold War, and modern anti-submarine warfare all reflected the lessons first learned when unknown radio operators decided to modify their plotting procedures to save convoys. The legacy extended beyond pure technology into institutional culture. Military organizations worldwide studied how the Royal Navy had eventually recognized and adopted an unauthorized innovation that emerged from operational ranks. The case became a reference point in discussions about organizational flexibility, the value of operational feedback, and how formal institutions could maintain discipline while remaining open to grassroots innovation. The innovations that began in the desperate struggle to protect convoys from U-boat predation would go on to fundamentally shape the future of naval warfare, influencing every major naval engagement and technological development that followed. The battle to master the Atlantic provided lessons that echoed through subsequent decades of naval history. The final operational reports arrived in Admiralty offices throughout May and June of 1945, documenting the conclusion of the Battle of the Atlantic. The war was over, and the true cost of the conflict became clear through comprehensive analysis. Hundreds of thousands of lives had been lost, and thousands of ships had been sunk over 5 brutal years. The victory was not merely a matter of statistics. It reflected adaptation, innovation, and the rapid development of technologies and tactics in response to desperate necessity. The Allies, initially trailing behind in the technological race, adapted quickly and decisively once they recognized the threat's severity. The unauthorized modification of the HFDF system exemplified this adaptation. What began as a simple innovation by unknown radio operators to save lives evolved into one of the key factors in Allied victory. The technique's journey from forbidden improvisation to official standard operating procedure illustrated how military institutions could, when survival demanded it, overcome institutional inertia and embrace effective innovation regardless of its source. Royal Navy officers who fought in the Western approaches throughout the war years carried memories of the battle for the rest of their lives. They remembered the tension of convoy escort duty, the bitter cold of North Atlantic storms, the fear of torpedo attack, and the satisfaction of detecting and engaging U-boats before they could strike. Many attributed their survival to the faster HFDF detection that had given escorts the critical advantage of time. A radio operator who served aboard HMS Campanula from 1942 through 1945 later reflected in an oral history interview, "We knew the modification wasn't officially approved, but we also knew it worked. Every minute we saved in getting a fix on a U-boat meant potentially saving an entire merchant ship and its crew. That knowledge made the risk of breaching protocol worthwhile." The formal adoption of the modified HFDF system marked the culmination of years of technological development and tactical adaptation. The battle to protect Allied convoys had required continuous innovation under the most demanding circumstances imaginable. The lesson was clear. Victory belonged not to those with the best initial technology or tactics, but to those who could adapt most quickly and effectively to changing circumstances. A 1945 report from the Royal Navy's Naval Historical Branch provided a comprehensive assessment. The rapid HFDF modification was one of the most significant technological innovations of World War II in terms of its direct operational impact. By reducing convoy losses and enabling more effective U-boat engagement, it contributed substantially to Allied victory in the Atlantic. The technique's development and adoption demonstrate how tactical innovations can emerge from operational necessity and, when properly recognized, transform military capabilities. The statistics told the story with stark clarity. Total Allied merchant shipping losses in the Atlantic declined from over 700 ships in 1942 to fewer than 200 in 1944. Despite continued German U-boat construction. U-boat losses, conversely, increased from approximately 80 boats in 1942 to over 240 boats in 1944. The reversal was comprehensive and decisive. The legacy of the forbidden HFDF twist extended beyond its direct contribution to the Battle of the Atlantic. It reshaped understanding of how naval warfare would be conducted in subsequent conflicts, reminding military planners and historians that the smallest innovations, born from operational necessity and perfected through combat experience, could alter the course of history. The technique saved countless lives during the war and influenced naval doctrine for generations afterward. In Liverpool, at the Western Approaches Command headquarters that coordinated much of the Atlantic convoy operations, a memorial was eventually established honoring all who served in the battle. The memorial's inscription captured the essence of the struggle. They faced the darkness of the deep and the fury of the storm. Through courage, innovation, and sacrifice, they secured the lifeline that sustained freedom. The Battle of the Atlantic was won through many factors: industrial capacity, cryptographic intelligence, technological innovation, tactical adaptation, and individual courage. Among these factors, the rapid HFDF modification represented a synthesis of all these elements, a technological innovation driven by operational necessity, refined through practical application, and ultimately adopted through institutional recognition of its effectiveness. The story serves as enduring testimony to the power of human ingenuity in the face of mortal peril.